Good morning. You know, as I look out here, I so wish Lincoln was here. Because I'm pretty sure that Lincoln would have a very, I don't know, clear conscience, good heart, good feeling, whatever it is, knowing the work that we all do. And I feel very honored to be here in front of you and be a part of talking to such like-minded people that are always striving to do better for kids with special needs. So thank you, and again, I'm very honored to be here. We'll talk about the three of us here in a minute, but as I sat through some things yesterday, some of the breakout sessions, I realized that IEP facilitation takes on it kind of has its own life in a way. We know it's an art form. There isn't one way to do it. We all have different needs. We all have different teams. We all have different demographics, etc., etc. But IEP facilitation seems to be in this realm discussed so much in the way of mediation when things have gone south already. I'm sure, and I want to take the temperature of the group here and kind of find out a little bit about you and who's in our audience. But before that, when I think about IEP facilitation, we used to think about it as conflict resolution. And in Key to Ed, when we've been together since '98, we started to think about it different. It is more about conflict prevention. If IEP facilitation is used out of the gate, it's used in every meeting, we prevent that piece of conflict or that get to mediation stage. Now, do we still have that area? Do we still live in that space and there will still be that? 100,000,000% yes. But the hope is that IEP facilitation is really more about prevention. So I would like to invite you for the next hour and a half that we're here together to think about it in that light, to think about it as a preventative piece, a preventative process. Not something that we do because, we need to bring a facilitator in and facilitate this meeting because they're bringing an attorney or they're bringing an advocate or the relationships and the trust are broken with that family, so it needs to be facilitated. I want you to think about it in all meetings and not just IEP meetings. Facilitation is just an organized way to run a meeting. That's it. An organized way to run a meeting. Let's do that in our IEP meetings so that every single member on that team leaves the meeting feeling valued and feeling heard. Let's facilitate so that all members on that team have a role in the meeting. Not one person's doing all the work. Let's facilitate those meetings so that we follow a process that follows federal law. Let's facilitate every meeting so that every single person on that team is making an informed decision. They're not just heads are spinning because we're throwing all our acronyms out, etc., etc. Facilitation is an organized way to run a meeting. We took it and put it in an IEP meeting process, and it is about prevention. So please, again, over the next hour and a half, I invite you to think about it in those terms, not necessarily about the conflict piece. So before we get started, I'll introduce myself and my team here, and then we'll get into kind of what we're going to be covering for the next hour and a half. My name is Cassie Velasquez. I work for Key to Ed, part owner of the company, and we've been at this since '98. I also work in Scottsdale, Arizona, as their lead IEP facilitator. And typically I'm called in when things are on that level of now we have attorneys, now we have advocates, we need to bring in a facilitator. But what we're going to share for the next hour and a half is how districts have changed their culture by using IEP facilitation as a prevention. We have Florida, we have that we would like to talk about, we have Texas that we would like to talk about, and then we can talk to Scottsdale as well. How did we change our culture using IEP facilitation as a preventative piece? Robin, Keim.
Hit it.
Yes.
Hi, everybody, as you know me now. Robin Keim, and I, similar to Cassie, am part owner of Keto Ed, which is a training and professional development group for special education facilitation and conflict resolution and prevention. But also I work in Scottsdale, Arizona as a special ed administrator. And one of our strategies that we use when there's a stressful situation is called Say What's Going On. And quite honestly, as you see, there are cameras rolling and lights. And I just want to say what's going on is I'm very excited about that because my twin, Meredith Baxter Burney, finally will be able to Google me and see that there is another one up there. So, okay. And then we also have...
My name is Kathy Clayton. I'm an educational consultant. I live in Austin, Texas. I've been doing that for about 4 years. Prior to that time, I worked at our state education agency. And I also do training with the Keto Ed folks.
Okay. Again, we kind of gave a little background, and Robin shared a little bit about what Keto Ed is, but it was developed in '98, and really, again, it was taking business facilitation techniques, not rocket science, simple techniques in a way to run an organized meeting and applied them to the IEP meeting process. Doug and Joyce Little have been at it for years. We've trained 17,000 people over the years in this process. And again, I want to focus on that it used to be conflict resolution and now we call it conflict prevention. So let's take a look at some of the outcomes for today. Just to ensure that we're all on the same page, I want to give you a brief overview. But before we start that, I want to look at all of you and find out kind of where you're at in this IEP facilitation process, what your level of understanding of it is. So if we looked at a scale from 0 to 5, 0 being FIEP is just an acronym I know, and 5 being I am a master facilitator. Where are we in that realm? So if you feel like you're a 0 or a 1, raise your hand. Okay, got 1. If you feel like you're a 2 or a 3, raise your hand. Okay, 4 or a 5. Okay. Okay, so let me ask the 1 or 2. What do you do? What's kind of your role?
I'm with a private firm by the name of the Study Group. It's
Okay.
an educational research company. It does a lot of work in the disability field. And I sit on cadres and advisory board.
Okay, excellent. Okay, 2s and 3s. I saw hands go up for 2s and 3s. Tell me a little bit about what you do.
I'm a legal advocate
Okay.
for Disability Law Center in Alaska. So I come in once there's a problem.
Okay.
Advocate for the
Okay, come in once there's already issues. All right. Who else? Somebody else a 2 or a 3. We share kind of what you do. Yes.
Special ed coordinator for a school district, for Lancaster School District.
Okay. Special ed coordinator.
Administrator.
Administrator. Excellent. Okay.
I'm part of Direction Service, a private nonprofit here in Eugene, and family resource advocate and support.
Okay.
So we go to IEP meetings and help folks understand the process and negotiate.
And negotiate. Okay. Okay, and you go in usually when it's facilitated, when it's already like, oop, we need to bring in a facilitator? Both, okay.
Most of our work is done prior to facilitation. Occasionally we get in after the fact there when it's in the process.
Okay. Okay. And how about a 4s or 5s? I saw some hands. Scott, I saw your hand. Tell me.
So I'm a mediator who got into facilitation in high conflict cases and
Okay.
now am advocating for earlier and earlier
Excellent.
intervention. If I can come in with scratching instead of conflicted, that's my.
Wouldn't that be great? Yeah, wouldn't that be great? Okay. Very good. Okay, yeah.
What he said.
Okay.
But when I introduce myself at IEP meetings, I always say I'm here because we've learned that when there are a lot of people at a table, it's easy if one person can help clarify issues and ask questions, and that's my role.
Absolutely.
So I try to say it that way too. Hopefully it can be preventative rather than I'm here to straighten you out.
The facilitator's not there to straighten you out. The facilitator's not there to be the sage on the stage and the knower of all things and the answerer of all questions. The facilitator is there to guide a process, to keep everybody focused on the same thing at the same time, to make things visual, to clarify, to make sure that everybody's making informed decisions. We look at facilitation in a way that is, we make a lot of proposals in our meetings, and then we get agreement. There's a piece in there that we miss out on, and that's the check for understanding piece. We make proposals all the time, and we say, can everybody agree to that? And we don't take the time to make sure that they're agreeing to what they really are agreeing to. They need to make sure they understand it. The resource room over here looks different than the resource room over here. Let's really define that. So that's another job of a facilitator in more of a preventative nature. Checking for understanding and clarifying. Two big pieces. Okay, so given that information, I want to still take a little bit of time to make sure that we're all operating with the same understanding, a shared understanding of what facilitation is, where Key to Ed comes from. So that as we move into how do we build culture and change the culture and build capacity in districts, that we're coming at it from an understanding that is shared amongst all. So I'm going to do a few things about a brief overview of IEP facilitation. So if it's new to you and it's old hat and you get it, just bear with me. Again, I want to make sure we have a shared understanding. Then, as I said before, we're going to talk about 3 different districts or places, states. We have Florida, Broward County in Florida, and we have Texas, specifically Region 20, and then we can talk about Scottsdale, Arizona. And we're going to go into how they built capacity. And then we have some data to show that, you know, putting this in as a preventative piece and building that capacity where it is being used in all meetings, not just bringing a facilitator because something's going wrong here, that it does reduce mediations, due processes, and complaints. So we'll get into that as well. All right, so what is a facilitated IEP meeting? Again, bear with me on this. We think a facilitated IEP meeting is a meeting that's developed by a collaborative team where all of the team members share responsibility for not only the meeting process, but the meeting results. Now, it's not one person's doing all the work, okay? It's collaborative. It's where decision making is managed through the use of specific facilitation skills. So you might think, okay, great, what's that going to get me? Okay, the first thing is it will help you to build and improve strong relationships among all the team members. We need those relationships because we're developing an IEP for a child together. We need to build those relationships from the start, not just come in and try to fix it up here. Build and improve strong relationships. The second one, reach true consensus. Consensus has this thought, people think of consensus perhaps in IEP meetings, or they don't even think of it at all, they don't understand what consensus is. So in facilitation, we take the time to explain it. It does not mean that we all leave the IEP meeting jumping up and down and being super excited and thrilled and hugging and high-fiving about every decision that we just made. Consensus is, can we live with, support, and implement the decisions that we just made in the meeting? Can we live with it? Can we support it? And can we implement it? That's a very different bar. And sometimes we want to get to consensus by making small agreements for a short amount of time. Maybe we don't have to agree to this IEP for a whole year. What can we do to come together, keeping us focused on the needs of the child, which I believe is the next one. I laugh at that third bullet because focusing the IEP content on the needs of the student sounds funny, because isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? But we don't always do that, do we? We focus on the master schedule in high school. We focus on when those related service providers are going to be on campus. We focus on the parents' needs. We need to stay focused on the needs of the child. And when we follow an IEP facilitation process that follows an agenda, that keeps everybody moving at the same pace, on the same topics at the same time, we look at strengths, then we look at challenges. The challenges drive the goals. The goals drive the service minutes. The service minutes drives the placement. When we follow that process, we stay focused on really what the child needs. It just naturally lends itself to that. Big piece of facilitation. And finally, to exercise an efficient guided meeting process where effective listening is practiced and reflective listening is practiced. In our 2 and 3 day trainings, we go into those at great depth. But that truly is what a facilitated IEP meeting looks like through the lens of Key to Ed. Okay, and just for fun, I want to do a little cathartic activity where you guys can talk out. I want to differentiate process and content. That's a big piece of IEP facilitation. Some facilitators, and I found this out yesterday in one of my breakout groups, some facilitators think that they are the person that gets involved in the content of the IEP. Now, granted, a facilitator could have 2 roles. A facilitator could be the case manager and the one running the meeting. In that case, they would be doing content and process. But it's important to keep those 2 separate. So, looking up here, I want you to share out some ideas. We'll take 5 or 6 of them maybe. We like to call them IEP meetings from hell. What?
You've been there. Come on.
What are some reasons why your IEP meetings didn't go so well? Just share out.
Lack of preparation.
Lack of preparation.
Unclear purpose.
I'm sorry?
An unclear purpose.
An unclear purpose.
No follow through.
Okay. Give her a minute to write down lack of preparation. Unclear purpose. Lack of follow through, I heard. Okay.
Prior bad experiences.
Okay. Past history, perhaps. Okay.
Lack of trust.
Lack of trust.
Lack of communication.
Okay. Lack of trust, history, trust, and communication. Lack thereof.
Unrealistic expectations.
Okay. Unrealistic expectations. Okay. We could probably, with this group, fill this whole room with that. That's the space we, yeah, right. That's the space we live in. But okay, we're going to come back to those in a second. What I want to do now is differentiate so that we have a shared understanding of the difference between content and process. So the content of an IEP is all the stuff we know about an IEP. It's the present levels of performance, the goals and objectives, all the stuff that goes into writing an IEP. It's the content, right? And if you think about it, in our teams down to the teacher, they are, drilled and killed with stuff in an IEP meet or in school before they even step foot into a classroom about how to write a measurable goal and objective and how to, all the compliance issues that go around an IEP. But they're never told or taught how to do a process. The process part is the how. How do we take all of that information, the present levels of performance, the goals and objectives, all of that stuff, and make it put it in an organized way so that we deliver it to the family in a way that gives them an opportunity to participate, gives them an opportunity to make informed decisions. Okay, that's the law. They're not just supposed to sign off. Okay? Giving them an opportunity to really understand the process of why their child gets the services they get. Not just because that's what we do here. Okay? That's the process part. We make proposals. We check for understanding. We check for agreement. That's the how. That's the process. They're very, very different. You can go into an IEP meeting with the best content, best present levels of performance, best goals and objectives, teachers awesome, great, research-based curriculum, etc., etc. Everything's great. But if you don't have a process in place to organize all that information, where everybody's feeling like they're valued in that meeting and heard, where everybody has a role, where everybody's playing an equal member of the team, your IEP could go to hell, even with the best content. So look back at your examples. Lack of preparation, is that a content problem or a process problem?
Process.
Unclear purpose, content or process? Lack of follow-through, content or process? History, trust, communication. Those are all process. Those are all process. We used to say 90% of our meeting problems are process problems, and we've understated that. It's more like about 99% of the problems we have in our IEP meetings are process problems. That is why we focus so much on process. Key to Ed is a process workshop, and IEP facilitation should stay focused, in our opinion, on process, not getting involved with the content. Okay. Preventions versus interventions. All preventions are the things you put in place before the meeting to keep the meeting from getting off track. Okay? Interventions is the space that we typically live in. It's what do we do once it's already off track? We have to intervene. Okay? We want to live in the prevention side, because if you look at that scale and you see a light bulb, one light bulb on the left, is that your left? Yeah. And all the light bulbs on the right, and you read that quote, it says an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of intervention. Think about that for a minute and let me know what that means to you. It's balanced, if you see, with one light bulb on the left, and that is the preventions. Yes.
Well, you're gonna take time dealing with the problem, whether it's prevention or intervention, and it's easier on your emotions and mental faculty, that's not the word, but mentally, if
Sure.
you're preventing rather than intervening.
You bet. It takes a lot less work to prevent it. It takes a lot less work, emotions, stress, all of that, to plan ahead, think ahead, do all of those things than to have to intervene. Again, that's what we're after, is a preventative piece of IEP facilitation, not come in when it's already bad. Okay, I think we're close to now having a shared understanding of this. Here's a quick summary. If you look at that, participation and prevention. We want every single member of the team, as I've said before, to have a role in the meeting and to be participating. We don't want one person doing all of the work in the meeting, because when one person does all of the work, that's the only person that's responsible for that IEP in the team's mind. Okay? We need parents to be doing the work. We need all of our faculty to be doing the work, all of our staff to be doing the work and sharing in that. We need participation. The resolving of conflicts. Having a process in place that follows federal law will just naturally prevent conflict. It just works that way. I said it before. When we really take the time in every single IEP meeting from the get-go to celebrate the child for a little bit and talk about their strengths. We need to know their strengths as well, don't we, to write really good goals and objectives and a good IEP? Yet we spend all of our time in our IEPs focusing on the challenges. I think our keynote yesterday spent a great deal of time talking about how we really need to find strengths and capitalize on those. With an agenda and outcomes so that we have a clear purpose. An agenda that follows the law. We focus on the strengths, and then we look at those challenges, and those challenges then drive the goals. Okay? All of that will help us from not getting to that conflict piece, because everybody will have a shared understanding of what we're talking about. Organization, that's the process piece, that's the agenda. How are we organizing all of the information? Make it visual. We in Key to Ed feel that we're 80% of us are visual learners. We talk about a lot of information in IEP meetings. Let's make it visual for all the families, for all the staff. Let's organize it visually. Collaboration and consensus, again. The collaboration piece, I've been saying everybody needs to have a role at the meeting. We spend a great deal of time in the beginning of our IEP meetings, not just introducing ourselves with our name, rank, and serial number. Hi, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I'm the school psychologist. Hi, I'm, so-and-so, and I'm the speech pathologist. Hi, I'm this, hi, I'm that. You get to the parent says, I'm just the mom. We have set up a hierarchy of importance in introductions, and we don't want to do that. Everybody needs to have a role, and what's your role? Hi, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I'm the school psychologist. My role here today for Johnny is, I have some data, I've done some testing I'd like to share with the team. Hi, I'm the speech pathologist. My role here today for Johnny is, what are you doing for Johnny? Not what your title is, okay? Hi, I'm Mrs. Smith, I'm the mom. My role here today is to advocate for my child. My role here today is to be my child's voice. My role here today is to share what's going on at home with my child, whatever the case may be. But what are we doing in this meeting with a clear purpose to talk about our role for that child? Efficiency. When you follow the process that we provide, efficiency might seem kind of funny because we say, well, it's going to make your meetings more efficient. And then you look at the things that we do and you think, how is that possible? You're adding this, you're adding that. Everybody's got to collaborate. Everybody has to, understand everything in the meeting. That's going to make our meetings even longer. And truly, it might in the beginning for those initial IEPs, when we really take the time to build trust in relationships with families and make sure they really do understand what we're talking about. But then later, it's much more efficient. Later, go slow to go fast. Put the work in up front so that later things are a lot smoother. I guarantee those IEPs, when parents understand the process and they're in 5th grade and they've been at it for a while, looks a lot different than that initial IEP. Shared decision making, we talked about that with the consensus piece, and ultimately, when we do all of these things, who is going to benefit the most from that? The student. Looking at this, dimensions of success, notice how each piece of that circle is equal. Okay? This is how we measure the success of a meeting. You have results. You got to get results. You got to get an IEP, right? You want to develop an IEP for that child. That's one of the purposes of the meeting. Okay, and then you notice process. You've got to have a process in place to organize all that information, and that's often the piece that we're missing. And then you have to have relationships. We want to build trust with families. If they are making decisions based on not understanding information and then something falls apart, even though it was not intentional of whomever, they think you were trying to pull one over on them. Take the time to make sure everyone understands. Now, I laughed at this too listening this morning to the keynote because if Lincoln were here, he was a relationship guy for sure, right? But did he have a process and did he get results? You bet he did. He was a balanced man, which is why he was so successful. Think about who you are. Are you a results person all the time? You just want to get in and get out. What are we doing for this kid? Let's do this. Okay? If you're a relationship person, do you make decisions based on, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, I don't want to upset anybody? Is that good? No. Is that staying focused on the child? No. But you need to have some of that. And you need to have a process. But you don't want to get bogged down with the process either. They need to be balanced. All right, we're not going to spend too much time here so we can get into the good stuff. I just wanted to make sure we all had a clear shared understanding of where we come from when we talk about IEP facilitation and how we build cultures and change cultures in districts. But here are some of these issues, some of which you said in your little cathartic activity here. Issues are one or two people doing all the work, and there are some solutions there. Parents, the one I want to focus the most on, I guess, is parents not involved in the team. How do we get parents involved in this process? Okay, we spend a lot of time talking about specific tools and techniques to get parents involved in the process before. There's this pre-meeting, people say. Robin hates it because she said, no, don't say pre-meeting. It sounds too much like predetermination. Okay, so we'll say planning. We'll say a planning meeting.
PA, preparatory activity. That's what the law calls it.
Okay.
It's legal.
Preparatory activity. Well, we know it's legal. We call it what we do, but we put it in emails, and there's been some weirdness about that. We're going to pre-meet. It's like, what do you mean you're pre-meeting? So, but how do we get parents involved? Well, even though we, meaning school team, is pre-meeting, pre-planning, planning, preparatory activity, whatever you want to call it. How can we involve the parents in that? Why does it have to just be this team doing that? Can we ask parents to send us their child's strengths from home and what they see as their child's challenges, and have that be part of the pre-meeting? Do we send home a draft beforehand? All of those things to be thinking about in the prevention piece of IEP facilitation. Okay.
Cassie, can I
Yeah,
just say something?
please.
Some of us here in the audience live in that, as Cassie would say, space of by the time we get there is no preparation. We don't have that prevention. There's plenty of preparation, but there's no prevention piece because now you've called me in. But actually, if we reframe that thought and think about how can you work with your school and family teams, just even for that meeting, in preparation of that meeting, in the PA meeting, so that yes, we probably could have done a lot more work 4 meetings ago, and now we're called in for meeting number 4. But we still can use an agenda, outcomes, and norms. We still can send that home to parents. And so while some of you may be thinking, I get called in the very ugly, it's already gone to hell, so to speak. But I think we can reframe that.
You bet. You bet. Okay. Kathy, you want to come up and share a little bit about Texas?
So given all of that, putting it together, as we love to in some kind of a diagram, I want you to think about that the whole point of this is creating this collaborative culture. And the elements to think about as we go into that is there is a real way that there is a process management. There is a way we're actually doing this. We all know what it is, even the parent. There is data management. We know exactly what we're going to have out of that, what we're looking for, how we're going to, again, manage it. And then lastly, that content management. What are we putting together and what's the result we're looking for? And all of that leads to, again, that middle of positive student results or outcomes. Now, if only life were as easy as these diagrams look, it would be great. Or if there was only one way to do this. If our point was to say, now if you just do these things, life is going to be good for you. The problem is the context is very important as to what's going to make this work for you and your situation versus you and your situation. So that's why I think these examples may be helpful to you as you look at how it's been done in several places. Now, I think to give you the context about Texas, I want to tell you that in Texas we have 5.2 million students in our schools. And 451,000 of them have been identified as a student with a disability with an IEP. So we are working with an 8.5% identification. When I worked at our state agency, and I know some of you are from state agencies. Would you raise your hand if you're from a state agency? Let me tell you what the club is about if you're one of these people. One of our ears is larger than the other because it's the one that we have the phone on. Because you feel like it's glued to your face. And I know when I was at the agency, I wore one of those time-lock operator things. So you're on the phone. And some days I thought, every parent of these kids has called today, and I've talked to them. Kidding, but it felt that way sometimes. But my point in saying this is that what I learned in taking these calls, and I bet a lot of you who do this are going to say the same thing. You sit there and people are going, you know, this is the da-da-da-da-da, and you're going, yes. Wow, I understand. That was probably really difficult. Sure. They're just talking. They're just venting. It's just all coming out. And at the end, you find yourself sometimes saying something like, this was usually, I would say 90% of the time where it went for me is I'd say, who are you actually communicating with at the school? And do you think it's ever anybody in the special education department? No. It's always somebody else. So it was always just refocusing them. Here's who you need to call. Here's the number. But you know, after you've taken a few million of these calls, it comes to you that, possibly there's a communication problem. Because at the end of my calls, I always got, oh, you have been so helpful. This has made all the difference for me. And they're going, I probably said 5 words. So I would say that at the state level, Texas started looking at the FIEP process conservatively about 8 years ago. And the light bulb for me was, oh my gosh, maybe if people left the meetings with a shared understanding and felt like they'd been involved with it, maybe we wouldn't be getting all these calls all the time. So that was clearly the hook for me. I was in it then. So another piece about our structure that you need to understand is our state is divided up into 20 regions. And they are an intermediary agency between our state agency and the school, and they are the technical assistance providers for the state. The state flows funds to them. So in order to figure out how this whole thought of training and philosophy on FIEP might roll out, the state set up particularly like little grants of money that went to these 20 regions to then look at how were they going to begin to build this grassroots effort on this very exciting philosophy. So they all did it a little bit differently. There was certainly some management of it, but again, it's the context of where you are. So that's the reason I tell you that is I want you to understand that the story we're going to tell today is typically about this region in our state. And then, of course, you'll hear about these other two. So, all right. So if you look at this region, and it's in San Antonio is the headquarters of it. You all know where it is, kind of down in the part of our state. They each have a number. That's how we identify them. And the first person who looks at the map always says, nobody did these numbers in a sequential way. And we go, excellent, you caught that. But anyway, looking at to this, that San Antonio and then Bexar County, and then there's a couple of other counties in there. There are 52 school districts within that region. There are 500 students, schools, and you see the students, but look at the languages. Okay? And so when Region 20 was looking at what their efforts were going to be, they looked at a lot of models, and long story short, they came to the understanding that they felt like using Key to Ed, that model was going to really be one of the ones, and has now ended up being pretty much the key one that they were going to use to look at training. So as they talked to their school districts about how they were going to do this and what the point was going to be, they looked at actually how were they going to look at this in a systemic manner. Okay? Now, the other little piece of this story that I need to share with you is that 4 years ago, our legislature passed, and we now have in law, the use of the facilitated IEP process in a neutral format. You're going, well, it's always neutral. Well, but this is like, I'm going to say this is the big end. Like this is somebody that the state, that you can request somebody from the state to come out to be that facilitator. Now, because you heard the number of students we're talking about, it's not like we have people that could be going every day, because it's at no cost, of course, to the school or the parent. So it does have sort of a codicil on it, that it is when an IEP meeting has not been able to reach agreement and we adjourn it. And in our state, that's for 10 days, and then we come back to the table to try to reach agreement. That's when either party can request someone to come in. Now, I think that's great we have that, but I'm going to tell you, I have yet to find a director of special education in a district who says to me, once that's happened, like somebody coming in is going to make the difference. We're already there. They've already downloaded the due process hearing form and are ready to send it. That's not going to make or break it for us. So that's when this look at how this preventative piece would really come into play and really begin to make the difference. So when Region 20 looked at it, they started having these trainings, and these are staff from districts who have gone through the training. And what typically happens is, I think in the first trainings, like they were made up of a lot of different districts, were coming like, you know, I'm gonna send my 4s and 5s in to see what they think about this training and how this might work. Because we had districts that were doing some training and using the FIP. That was not novel at that time. Not all of them, but some. And they said, oh, this is pretty good stuff. Maybe we'll send more people. So some of the more recent trainings that have gone on, it's really people sending, like, where literally everybody in the district who facilitates meetings is going to go in and get that training. Because here's the thing that I think is so important in looking at this when you begin to implement it in a district. It can't be, we don't ever do our meetings like this, but oh man, when Mr. and Mrs. Smith come, we have this big gun facilitator, and the director of special ed is there, and the security guards outside the door. Not helpful. And you know, there are people that get a lot of pleasure out of knowing they've upset everybody and the big guns are out. I've rattled the cage one more time. So it's really about looking at how do we conduct our meetings all the time? How do we get consistency? And yes, still there is a continuum. And there are times that maybe somebody from that campus that does it all the time is not going to be the best person. We're going to bring someone in from another campus. But that's what they've begun to get training and look at. So if we're going to implement, how do we want to do this? What's our plan? So you see the maintenance of that is looking at, there are seminars. Some districts have sent people in to get the actual on-site training. And then what they do is they say, okay, we're going to train some more people online so that they're up to speed. We're going to begin to look at how we're going to, again, get that consistency within our district. And then talking about these awareness trainings, because you know what? Here's what I think we do sometimes. We have this really cool stuff we do, and we tell everybody in the district, but we never tell the parents what we're doing. So all of a sudden, I come to an IEP meeting and it's totally different than it's ever been. You know, that agenda's up on the wall and we're all walking in together and they're going, okay, this is creepy. We've never done this before. So it's really making sure everybody understands this is how we do our business here. We want this to be the kind of meeting that everybody feels like they're in the same place. So anyway, that element of it. And then ongoing, I know that Region 20 is continuing to work with Key to Ed about what are going to be the next iterations of this. But again in our state, because we now have in law this big N neutral, the ability to kind of look at how do we just do our business better is really important. And again, there are 19 other ways this has been done. This is Region 20. You know, now here's the trick. I went around this the whole way telling you that. Why? Okay, so you said that y'all didn't think that FIP training was going to help with any of this data, so then why is this the data you're keeping? Well, those of you that are from a state agency know why that's the data we're keeping, because that's the data we have. And as a state, when you report this data to Washington, you're looking at that these numbers are going down. So when every year when Texas sends our data to the feds, which is how many of these things we have, and of course, this is the simple condensed version. Believe me, there's 55,000 lines behind this of what this all is. But it's that we look at where is it going? Is it, you know, we want mediations up. We want complaints and due process hearings down. So we have this data, then Texas cuts the data by region, and then regions cut it by district. So what you're able to do is see, where am I in this? What does it look like? And again, not the best measurement, but it's the most formal one we have available that actually has data. But then within that, districts look at, so really, why are we doing this and what do we want? I know we have a district that at every single meeting, when the parent is leaving the room, they get a postcard. And it's about 4 questions of how was the meeting? Blah, 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 blah. But the last piece is there anything else that you would like to look at or talk to somebody about or that you're concerned about? And this was, and a district in particular, I know who does it, is a very large district. And the director and assistant director look through every single one of those cards. As I understand it, the first 6 months, not so much a pleasure. Not such a good thing. But after that, it just dropped. Because what people figured out is, if you want to talk about something, the director of special education called the parent. Now, you talk about establishing a trust. It was unbelievable. And if somebody wrote on that card, oh, I just love when Mrs. Smith, blah, 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 in our meeting. Well, Mrs. Smith got that feedback. Change the dynamic of it. That's just one of a million ways you can do that. But it's all about sending the message to everybody, be it the regular education teacher, be it the occupational therapist, or being that parent or grandmother that comes to the meeting. This is about us. This is about all of us, and we want to measure how this goes. So that's the Region 20 story.
Okay, the handoff is happening. Okay, so now let's take a look at, go to our next school district. So Broward is in, I like to call it Fort Lauderdale. I have friends here from Broward County, and that's where we come to train, so that's what we're going to call it. But I know it's a giant area as well. And it's similar to Region 20 in the numbers, as you can see. But the difference is, good job knowing sign language. The difference in this is that it's one district rather than regions and many districts. So when Cassie and I started to think about what 3 areas would we look at for our case studies, we really wanted to go across the nation. And we thought, okay, well, we have West Coast, Scottsdale, and we have Texas, which is our middle, and then, of course, Florida is on the East Coast. And this seemed perfect because Broward really did kind of follow the same process that Texas had. They started thinking about it as a state initiative. The state decided, okay, let's get together and we'll offer this out to the state and we'll see who bites, who wants to come. That was in, well, let me talk to you about this really quick because we start with the demographics and the culture. And one piece that I want to point out here with Broward, you can see 135 different home languages. Now, when I talked to the data person over in Broward and we talked about languages, that's home languages. There's multiple home languages within the homes as well. We've got a really complex group of people here in Broward. Makes it really interesting. It also makes for an interesting IEP meeting. They found that out. They decided to have an initiative where they would build more communication and a better process in their IEPs. And so it was asked that they would send out drafts. Everybody would send out a draft. Not it's a good idea. They would send out drafts. And what they found from that about 6 months in was there was a lot of misunderstanding on what that draft meant. Because of some of the culture and language differences, they started to think about the draft, some of the parents, not all, that the meeting had been completed and that this was basically their notification. And some of them were aggravated by it. Some of them said, okay, thanks very much for the info. But really what the district said was that wasn't our intention. So we really need to think that through. And the outcome of that and looking at facilitation was we're going to not only send drafts out, but we're going to head that up with an information letter. And we're going to ask for parent input beforehand. And then we're going to make our draft much more robust and meaningful and send it back out. So they did some work there. In Scottsdale, we'll talk about we have some language issues as well. But I asked Broward recently and I said, so have you facilitated with a lot of translators? Because obviously we're going to need to, right? And they have. And we're here for transparency. It can be cumbersome with translators. But the overall effect that they're starting to hear, not formally, But informal feedback is when you facilitate, you take the time to hear me. You take the time to make it visual, and we promote charting every time the parents or the staff speaks. We chart it on paper. The feedback is, even though that wasn't the language I used, you charted it through the translator, and you valued my input to help create that collaborative piece. So while it's a little cumbersome, it's moving in that right direction. So we're glad to see that. So let's look at Broward's capacity building plan. And it is similar to what we heard with Region 20, but a little different. So we had that initial state training where 12 of Broward's administrative staff attended the facilitation training. And really their intent was to go and look at, is this process good for our giant district? Will it help us to arm our people, our 12, right? Our 12 staff to help with really contentious meetings. And the outcome of that training was those 12 people came back and they did feel empowered, but they had a different conversation that they had set out to have. They said, let's look at it differently. What if we were able to reach out to the powers that be and think about training overall, all of our ESE specialists, give me the wording, ladies, special ed staffing. If we were to train them all, or a majority of them, how would that change things? How would that make it different than the firemen coming in? The 12 people, I don't even know how the 12 could handle that. So they sat down with those powers that be. They really sat down and talked to their executive director, their compliancy department, and then brought in Doug Little and said, what can we do to build a plan? They reached out, they got some funding. And the Florida Department of Ed was very excited about that. They said, wonderful, we're glad you liked it as well. But Broward found some funding within their district and they decided we're gonna go forward with this. And the first year, let me make sure I say the numbers right. The first year they had 3 trainings of 40 staff members. So again, it's a little bit chunking away at it little by little, right? Their staff is 300. They are hoping to get trained. So that first year they said, well, we're going to try and get 120 and see what happens. And they did. And some of the really neat things that came out of that training that wasn't a Key to Ed thing that Broward thought about doing, because they could see there might be some barriers to this. We have a little portion of our group that's going to be trained and excited and empowered, but there's still going to be some people who are going to come to it with, well, we can't do that, or how am I going to find chart paper? You know, you've heard it, right? The littlest things just interrupt us and paralyze us. So their department decided we're going to have some non-negotiables. And I don't know if you've ever met a special ed teacher who likes gifts at the end of a training. You could give them M&Ms and they think they won the lottery, right? Broward decided to do blanket-wide agendas, outcomes, norms, and a parking lot. Printed them out, blew them up on big paper and laminated them. That wasn't Key to Ed. That was them saying, how are we going to build this capacity? How are we going to make sure that this works, that everybody buys in? So they did that. And at the end of our 2 and 3-day trainings, they walked out with a packet, which, I mean, I'm telling you, Smile City, just because they got something, right? So that was their first barrier. And the people, they liked it. The other thing they did, they asked for feedback. When you, not if you facilitate, when you facilitate, now you're armed with these tools, techniques, and physical tools. When you facilitate, give us feedback. Send in artifacts. Take pictures of how you did it in your teeny tiny rooms with your giant posters. How did you overcome those barriers? And really what I saw as somebody that was stepping back and really watching the growth of this district and the excitement of it, where people were emailing back pictures and they were saying, I figured it out. Or I did a tabletop. I didn't use the giant agenda, but it worked. We stayed on track. Everybody participated. Oh my gosh. One person's feedback was, oof, that first one didn't go so good. Just recently, we're still involved with him, I had an email from someone saying, oops, when I'm copying the agenda, the federal agenda, I left off that third part, services.
okay. She knew it well enough that when they got to the services, she said, I left off the services. No problem. I have these right here. And threw that agenda up on the wall. I used to say threw up that agenda. That's a whole different training. Maybe after this one. Okay, so that's how they got started. Some more things that they did. So their initial, they continued to train and train and train. Through 2012 through 15, they did get their 300 people trained. Nobody ever quits Broward. They don't have to continue to train new people. That's not true. So they certainly they have turnover like all of us do. What's the national average, right? 3 years. If we can keep them 3 years, we're doing good. Okay, well this is helping with that too. People are feeling empowered. They're feeling like they can control it and they're not dancing through something, that they know what they're doing. So that's helping. For maintenance, they decided how can we continue this? And they did that a lot of ways. I have some things listed up here. The fiddlers are their training, so to speak. I get training personnel that go around and train and support. So that's in their agency in the Broward County. They did seminars. What are little overviews? Brain Shark is like a PowerPoint that they posted, and it's an online kind. Anybody can access it. And when I say anyone, I do mean community members, parents, staff, principals. Think about all the people we need to let in on the biggest secret in the world. There's an actual way to run an IEP meeting. They worked with us on advanced trainings. The people that went through the initial trainings came back for a half day, and we really worked in on some of those high stress techniques of how to getting to yes, as the author said yesterday, or how to reduce conflict or get through some of those tricky things, because we all know no matter how many preventions are in place, there's going to be some tricky moments, and that's okay. We're going to help reduce that. So we came back and did some advanced trainings and awareness trainings. But really, this isn't on us. This is about Broward thinking through what else can we do to maintain this momentum and build this continued collaboration. So they did that, and one piece jumped out at me when I was interviewing them all the time, because they're fun people, and so I just get to charge for that. I said, what else did you guys do? And they said, we worked with staff, we worked with principals, administration, APs. We put language in our LEA agreement on non-negotiables. You'll use agendas, outcomes, norms. They started mandating some things, but not everything. Certainly facilitation is use of those tools. But how do you mandate that you collaborate? And how do you mandate that you communicate clearly? So those pieces came in trainings and talking and really going back and forth and seeing where the hiccups were. Some other things they did 2-hour information trainings for parents and community. They did 6 of those. So they're just making sure their community understands what's going on. And they worked with the administration in their evaluation tool to help motivate teachers to use these processes and get points, for a better way of saying, our evaluation tool that makes everybody so worried and upset. You're going to evaluate me for being a special ed teacher. But they turned it positive. I'm going to help educate your administrator and show you how you are doing your job, and you can feed it into your evaluation tool. I'm collaborating, I'm preparing, I'm using data, etc. So that they really use that. It's just started this positive momentum and change. Ongoing, continue initial trainings with staff because there is turnover and that's life. And continued overview information sessions. And what's the outcome of all of this? Good news. Overall cases are in decline. Due process cases are down a lot. State mediation and state complaints, up and down. But when I talked to the district, they did say, for the due process cases, only 2 went to trial. Of those 23 listed, 2. Huge time saver energy saver, emotions, right? They were able, through facilitation, to go back in and solve rather than continue to go on to trial. Good stuff is happening, and they're continuing on. They're looking at a great year up ahead. Any questions on Broward and how such a large county, or anything I left out, ladies, that you want to add to the discussion, at the celebrations? We're lucky to have them in the audience as well.
Question.
Yes.
What did the parent trainings look like? You said you reached out to the community. What did they look like?
That's a great question. And when we provided one parent, I can speak for myself and then I'll ask you guys to follow up. We provided an overview. And in fact, we have an overview of facilitation on our website, Key to Ed website, which you guys have access to, that really gives a snapshot picture of facilitation. So when we did the parent training, that was all it was. A lot of what Cassie did this morning, only maybe not as intense. And just talk to them about what will you see in a meeting? What will your role be? What are your staff's roles going to be? How can you collaborate with us? How can your child collaborate in this process? Things like that, very, very general. Anything else that you would have added to your parent trainings? Basic overview to increase their knowledge, really.
And I think another big piece to that is making sure that they understand they're an equal member of the team. So we're going to do some pre-work with them, if you will. We're going to ask them to send us their strengths and challenges that they see about their child. We're going to ask them to say what they think their child should work on to get that collaboration going. So all of that came through in the awareness.
Good. So Scottsdale Public School System, certainly near and dear to our hearts. That's where we work. And we were fortunate 3 or 4 years ago to sit in this training with Scottsdale School District, kind of ground floor, and watch the progression of building capacity in a much smaller district comparatively. So as you can see, 26,000 students, about 2,500 special ed students, 31 schools, and 51 home languages. But still, I mean, there's need there, right? There's a lot of cultural diversity. And based on this, what we've seen, we've added a layer to this where we're starting to translate our agenda's outcomes and norms into the home language. And as a prevention, we send that, our rule of thumb, and we guide our team's rule of thumb is at least 3 days, but a week ahead of time is our hope, where you send the proposed agendas, outcomes and norm, not the this is what you will follow, but the proposed, in their home language so they know how to plan as well. And that's gotten great feedback. Certainly with the draft, of course.
Can I add something about the draft? Something that has seemed to take off for us regarding the draft is we used to send a draft home on the actual IEP forms, you know, and just with draft marked on every page. And for parents that maybe don't understand the process, new to special education with a younger child, or parents with different cultural backgrounds and different languages, wouldn't have an understanding about that packet of stuff. They either wouldn't even look at it, or there's all of that legalese and there's all of that compliancy stuff in that paperwork that we know what it all means. How about a parent-friendly draft is a Word document with the present levels of performance as the staff sees it, and then some goals and objectives that we're going to propose, written in language that we understand, not all of the formal E's. That's the draft. That's it. A Word document with just some stuff about the child. And then asking for parents, can you add to that? Here are some strengths we see. What other strengths do you see? Here are some challenges we see. What other challenges do you see? That's the draft, not the whole IEP document with an agenda on top and outcomes and this is what we're going to do in this meeting. It's very overwhelming for families. We live in that space. We do this every day. It's another day at the office for us. For them, that's a very daunting packet of stuff. So how can we make it more user-friendly?
So our capacity building plan was similar. We had an initial face-to-face training with about 30 people, administrators and special ed teachers. And I think we had a few speech pathologists in there as well. Went through a 3-day training and again, had a conversation similarly. Wow, First of all, we joke about this. Boy, where was this 30 years ago when we were actually classroom teachers? There's a process. And how can we bring this to all of our classrooms so that we do some preventative measures and we just run a very good IEP meeting and build a great document for that child, focusing on the needs. So we looked at e-learning. Scottsdale bought 100 e-learning seats and built capacity there initially. Was a way to reach out, and it's hard in our district to get people out of their classrooms, I'll just be honest with you. So that was one way that we met that roadblock. Then on the administration team, we went to principal meetings similar to what we described in Broward, and we talked to the principals and the admin team in Scottsdale and really raised their knowledge so they could help support the teams. So then when they're coming in as the LEA rep, they're not saying, hi, my name is so-and-so, I'm the AP, and where are we placing this child? They understand that there's a process that we need to follow in order to get to the entire document. And of course, we did parent trainings, similar to what we described. There's a parent university that we had on a Saturday where a few parents came in and we showed our 8-minute overview and then opened the discussion to how much do you know about your child's IEP, et cetera, just raising more awareness. We met with our advocacy groups. We try to get them in. And the funny thing is, 3 years later, and I've been doing this a long time, I know you can't tell by the way I look 15. Believe it, makeup's good and the lighting is awesome. In 3 years, people that I have sat across the table with, in an adversarial way, are starting to pull out the norms when they're misbehaving. The culture is changing. And we are total nerds, and every time we see it happen, we call each other. I was in a very contentious meeting the other day, and somebody started to have some behaviors, and it was not the child.
Or you.
Believe it or not. And she said, I know. I've been in enough of your IEP meetings, Robin. I'll respect the views of others. Although, as you said, I don't have to agree. You bet. It was great. The culture is changing. We can work with that. We don't have to agree, but we do need to use respectful language. We need to collaborate. It makes a big difference. I was so excited to see that. I thought, there you go. That's the evidence. In our maintenance, we're doing seminars. Because we work for the district, we have a little bit more leeway, and we created some Moodles, which are online courses that also do some check-in. We use the curriculum. Advanced trainings, book studies, and awareness trainings. Our ongoing plan, we feel very passionately about mandates. Mandates are tricky. We don't love them because when you start mandating, that's a checklist. Another thing I got to do because the director got it in her crazy head or went to a seminar and this is the new great thing, right? We've all been there from the classroom perspective all the way up to the admin perspective. So we try not to mandate a lot of things. We have a non-negotiable agenda, outcomes, and norms, but we really, really try to empower them with listening skills, helping others to listen, helping to train them to prepare and prevent and collaborate.
Are there any perks to the teachers for participating? I understand the tools, and everybody should inherently want to be a better listener and communicate.
Yeah.
Okay. But sometimes the 9 to 5 grind for teachers gets in the way of clear vision of what they need.
And so let me clarify, when you say perks, to attending more training?
Either training, like if a teacher went through the e-learning process kind of stuff, what did they get out of it outside of theoretically being a better
human?
Yeah.
And professional. Yeah.
And
I mean, whatever.
Unfortunately,
No.
just being better people doesn't always drive, or motivate.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Unfortunately, it doesn't drive the ones that it needs to drive, right?
That's
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And certainly in our district, we were able to give professional development hours and for recertification.
PDUs.
So we absolutely were able to do that. That's certainly something to think about because you're right. That will be a barrier that you'll have to think through.
And let me add too, we didn't start out mandating anything at the beginning. That took about 3 years of us training sort of the people that would go in and handle the situations when they were sticky. Okay, we started in that space, but we wanted it to be preventative. So it took us about 3 years doing some e-learning and all the things Robin's talking about. And it wasn't until then that we felt that enough people had heard about it. Enough people had been trained, and the feedback that we were getting from our stakeholders was very, very good. So then we mandated it and said, you must at least, at the bare minimum, have outcomes, agendas, and norms at your meeting. And then from there, we'll continue to train to give them those human skills that really help.
Another unexpected outcome that we built in Scottsdale, I'm just going to tell on us, and I'm sure we're not alone in this, the evaluation tool is really a big bone of contention with teachers. They feel very threatened by it. And special ed teachers, I think particularly because we don't operate in the same area that our gen ed folk do, they really feel weird about it when somebody's observing them and nobody even knows what's supposed to be really going on. So we also, as a bonus, sat down with the administrators and lined up the piece by piece how they could benefit and gain points on that. They really appreciated that. Mm-hmm. The union didn't love it. We didn't officially write it, and you can't change the rubric, but we did show them how you can benefit from that. So that was another hook, really. Mm-hmm. And certainly the parent feedback. Our parent feedback has been incredible, and it was bumpy, to say the least, at the beginning. I remember my first facilitation, and I did use the poster-sized everything, and the mom walked in and said, I didn't realize it was a poster presentation. I would have brought my own. And I said, no problem. This is something new the district's trying. I'll be happy to take it down. Or can you hang in there with me 5 minutes and I'll explain to you what they mean? She was like, I can, we'll see. But yes, sir.
In your trainings, do you address the time frame? I mean, how far in advance of the IEP meeting, an annual IEP meeting, do you start this process so that by the time the meeting comes, you're up to speed?
We certainly do if it comes up as a question and a particular team is having difficulty with that. It's hard to say because some preparation may take longer than others. If you've got 15 players and you O&M, M&Ms, LMNOP, all those people coming into the room, I would say start 2 to 3 weeks out, starting to get those drafts in together. But if it's a simple 4 or 5 person team, it wouldn't be the same. Absolutely, we would do that. And another question that kind of piggybacked on it, I think we were in the same meeting, asked about what if you have multiple parts? Or what if you can't get all the work done in these tricky meetings in the time that was allotted? And we do talk about how to wade through that, because that will happen, especially in the really big meetings. You're not going to get it done in 45 minutes. But we talk about how to preventively set up ahead of time so that everybody's on the same page with that. And one of our first agreements, how will we deal with that when we get to the 42 minutes and everybody starts running? So,
and I think it's important to note we do spend time in our norms that we use that talk about a time limit. Now, that doesn't mean that we're only going to give you 45 minutes or an hour and a half or whatever to talk about your child. That can become offensive. But at the same time, we are going to respect everyone's time and have a start time, and we're going to have an end time. But what that end time means is we're going to look at where we're at on the agenda 10 minutes or so before that end time. And we're going to say, if we're still up here in present levels of performance, chances are we're going to need to schedule another meeting. If we're down here in services, can everybody hang in for another 10 or 15 minutes? But you get that commitment and agreement up front out of respect for everyone's time, but also so you don't have those people getting up, those gen ed teachers that think they only have to stay to say their piece and walk out. You get that commitment up front and the commitment to stay for the allotted time that you've set for that meeting. But then again, at the end, we don't end it just because the time's up, so we're going to rush through it. No, we explain, we're going to see where we're at on the agenda.
It's another way that the culture has changed as well. Within 3 years, people understand now as a district, we've decided 2 hours is our limit, and then we'll reschedule. We never limit discussion. We limit the time at the time. So we've let that be known, and it's taken 3 years for those hostage holders to finally understand we will be meeting again.
Yes.
So
Well, no,
you
I'm sorry.
can
yeah.
either be efficient with your discussion, or if it's something that we really need to break down, great. But those hostage holders have started behaving better because they now need to look at their books, and they know they're not going to be there for 5 hours.
And that took time because we
It
used
did.
to let our meetings, we would say 2 hours, but they would go 4 or 5 because people would just like, we just want to get this done. But nothing good happens after a couple hours. No good decisions
Yeah.
are
Crazy
being
stuff
made
starts to
for
happen.
children after
true.
a couple hours of that kind of an environment. But yesterday in my breakout group, they were talking about how the facilitator was sharing how they do 8-hour meetings. But they don't go past 5. And so I just want to make sure living in the space, obviously when they're really intense, high mediation type meetings, they do take much longer than 2 hours. But we're
Yes.
living in the space of just your typical IEP meeting. We won't go over 2 hours.
And what you may need to build into your norms are, in 2 hours, we will take a caucus. Or let's propose that in 2 hours we take a caucus. Does that work for everybody? You know, it depends. So those are things you can think about. We could go on and on talking
could.
about that, but I realize that we also have a time limit.
Oh, we do.
So-
Our time limit. What's our time limit?
So we
Okay.
we do need to move along. As you can see, our data, again, the numbers are lower, but we do see them going down, and we're excited about it. Due process case, knock on wood, somebody, we haven't been in one in 3 years. It's exciting stuff. So things are heading the way Kathy mentioned, the State Department, and just being good humans, we want to see it reducing. We don't want to spend a bunch of time dealing with that. Outcomes related to the use of FIEP, this is feedback we've gotten from staff, parents, and that's another thing that we're getting more robust with, is helping students to participate in their facilitations. How can we empower them? Can they do the charting? Can they start with their strengths? So we're really looking into that. The process focuses on the needs of the students. Teachers feel more prepared. Team members feel capable of preventing or managing conflict. And you can see parents have a voice. Contentious meetings result in positive outcomes. I can attest to that. We're the ones that are in the contentious meetings, and they are resulting in positive outcomes. And certainly it protects the rights of the students. And our awesome attorneys that we always have to, weed them in. The feedback from our district attorneys, as well as when we've traveled around and just talked to different attorneys at some of these functions, is that it is just best practices. We're not telling you guys anything new that you don't know. It's best practices. It ensures that everybody on the team shares the responsibility, which the law says to do. It bolsters the case that we are following the process. That's total attorney talk, isn't it? It bolsters my case. We have an attorney that always says, is that defensible? When you're writing your prior written notice, how are you writing it? We facilitated this. We use that language all throughout our prior written notice. It has been helpful in some complaints. It's great. It just saves you. And it tends to lead or lend itself naturally to the collaborative process. And you guys can see that we truly believe that. And more importantly than what our attorneys say, feedback from the parents. And these are emails that people that we have trained, they've shared the feedback from the parents. And I won't read it to you, but you can see being the visual person I am, referencing your charts as we moved through the discussion was helpful. It's a lot of information. Let's make it visual. A couple of times we've had feedback. Look at this one. I told the team this meeting would be an hour and a half if we were lucky. We've all had that discussion, haven't we? It was done in 45 minutes. They followed a process. I remember this guy. Mm-hmm. They couldn't believe it. So you can see, I mean, we have this posted on our website. It's not us saying it, it's real people, so to speak. It really does work. And we just are excited to share it with you. But if you have tomorrow at 10:45 a.m. and you want to hear more about it, Kathy and David are actually going to be talking about implementation plans and how to take this from just the training to an actual full implementation.
So we ask you guys if you have nothing to do at 10:45.
Rob?
It is tomorrow. And that's all for now, unless you guys have questions. And we love
Yeah.
questions or any kind of input, examples that you've had with facilitation. I think we have another
Go ahead.
10
Yeah, we
minutes.
do.
I had a question about the neutral legislation that created the neutral. I'm not sure I fully understand the impact of that, the relationship. It sounds like it's an alternative to the in-county process, is to bring somebody in for, I'm just not sure I understand.
Do you want to hear?
In our state, we had a body of people, and they were, for the most part, some of our disability rights organizations and our advocacy organizations, and some parents who believed that there needed to be a watchdog, and I'm not making these words up. These were the words said at our legislature. There needed to be a watchdog at these meetings. These are important meetings, and sometimes the districts can't run them the way they should be run. You're with me, right? Okay. So they tried. We have legislative sessions every 2 years. The third time they went forward with it, that's when our law got passed. So, in essence, if you want to think about it this way, what that leaves you is, as a parent or a district, we have a broken relationship, right? In my opinion, what I find, I have no data for this is when it is no longer about the kid. I don't like you. And when we're in a meeting, it's crappy, and it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
And I don't trust you. So you are at an impasse at a meeting. You cannot move. So you adjourn the meeting. We have, as I said, in our state, it's 10 days to come back to the table to try to resolve it. A parent or a district has the ability to contact the state, just like you do a mediator, and say, we want somebody to come in and actually facilitate this meeting. They don't know me, they don't know Gary, they don't know anybody. And so, if the other party agrees, because it's just like the mediation deal, both parties have to say, okay, then somebody does come in, and typically they're going to call ahead of time and talk to the parent, you know what I'm saying, like any good facilitation, and then try to reach that agreement. Now, this has not been in place very long, and the requests have been very, very low. 3 requests.
So just in terms of the relationship between the work that you're doing here and that, this is basically preventing much of the need for that.
Correct.
Okay.
And the other thing that I know some districts, I've talked to directors in our state who said well, I would be so embarrassed if a parent called and requested that. And I said, okay, don't go there. Don't go there. For whatever reason, that parent thinks it has raised to a level, I need outside help. I said, now, what you need to do is determine, do you? I've heard some, in some cases, it's just like a complaint or a due process hearing. Something gets filed, and the director never even knew there was a problem. So some directors call and try to work, and that, I think, is what's happening a lot. But, there are times when, no kidding, it's broken. And our tool belt is empty. We've pulled everybody out we know. Fine, let's have somebody come in and see if we can work this out.
And I think that's important we started this off by saying, facilitation, I wanted to invite you to think about it in a different way. Facilitation isn't about when you call that person in when it's broken. Facilitation is an organized way to run a meeting where everybody's understanding, everybody's feeling informed, everyone's feeling valued. That's a different level. There might be that time to call that person in still, where you need a real neutral person, but every single meeting should have a facilitated process that you follow and somebody to do it.
What I think about all the time in the early part of my career, I was a preschool teacher, children 3 to 5 with disabilities. My first love. My husband was an assistant principal when we married. And he'd come over there, those meetings and those parents, I don't like the people, I don't like the assessment people on our desk, all this stuff, and they go, and I said, okay, here's the deal. This is the first time you're in that meeting. Some of those parents have been fighting this system in their mind or literally a long time. There's no reason for that to happen. There is no reason for that to happen. Let's get it right and keep it right. So.
And with that, with your question too, the topic today is certainly prevention. We do work with states on initiatives to train neutral facilitators because that's their role, that's their model as well, especially with the alternate dispute resolution continuum, right? We need to look at that continuum. So there's different, same process and philosophy, just different ways to apply it. It's exciting. Scott?
So when you talk about capacity building, it sounds like there's, and that spectrum, at one extreme there's facilitated IEPs that most people think of them bringing in a neutral person.
Right.
Other is what you're talking about, a process, even if it's just run by the same people that have already always
bet.
run them, we're going to do this better, best practices.
Yes.
Is there any middle ground of kind of like the shared neutrals program in the federal government of people in districts or ESDs or something serving as neutrals?
Yes. In fact, right in front of you.
Yeah, that's actually my job in Scottsdale, is to be that neutral person. Now, some people go, "How can you be neutral? They write you a check." I'm neutral because all neutral truly means is that I don't have any content knowledge or direct service time with that child. Do I look at the IEP and talk to the team before and talk to the parent before? Absolutely. But I don't have any direct service time with that kid. So I go into the meeting merely just to make sure all the issues are out on the table and to make sure that I've pulled all my tools out and organized this process and an agenda and put all the things together so that we can move through the meeting staying focused on the child. It's my number one goal. We're just going to stay focused on that kid, not on what everybody else wants. So that makes me neutral. And so that's what I do in Scottsdale. Some places have done that through their districts where they've trained a handful of people that can be called upon and like on a contracted basis or by hour paid, supplemental contract kind of thing to come in and run the meeting. We have teachers in our district that will call their teacher friend who they know is a facilitator and say, "You know what, I have a meeting coming up and it's going to be sticky and there's some relationships broken amongst some of the staff or whatever the reason is. Can you come and help just run the meeting so that I can really stay focused on what my job is as case manager," or whatever the case may be. So this level of facilitation that we're talking about, people might be wearing dual roles, but then you still have that other piece as well.
Yeah.
So, yes, Tracy.
Well, I just want to further support what you said because I think a lot of people think, oh, but how can that person really be a neutral if they're a teacher
Yes.
friend? So a lot of my research has looked at those different models, and it's been all those different, sometimes principals borrowed from other principals, districts borrowed from other districts that are neighboring.
You bet.
And consistently everyone has said that model has been very effective, and they're still able to really view them as neutral.
Especially if you're building that trust, it just takes a couple of times of being neutral and following through with it. Just like it only takes once to not be neutral, and you've squashed it.
Absolutely.
So.
Are parents though given the opportunity to know that there's some type of relationship though in the process?
Absolutely.
We're transparent.
Transparent as can be, and that's one of the big things that facilitation is about, is transparency in the meeting all the way around. I mean, we start out by saying that. Don't hold back in this meeting and then have the meeting in the parking lot as you're getting in your car, right? Let's have the transparency and bring it out. You bet. So everything's out on the table.
And an opportunity to talk to the facilitator.
Beforehand.
In our relationship, we like to call the parent as well and explain our role, or email the parent and say, "I will be the facilitator. Here will be my role. Please call me, or let me know if there's anything I need to weave into that agenda." I mean, we really want that. That's transparency is what we're after.
You bet.
Sure.
You bet.
Any
All
other
right.
questions? Thank you guys.
Thank
for
you
hanging
guys
in
so
there.
much.
Have a great day.